Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Stacey, or welcome if this is the first video of mine that you've seen, which it might be, to be fair. So I'm just going to do a quick wrap up of what I read in November. So I started off with an audiobook of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That was a reread for me, which I know I'd said in my last video. I was talking about why I wanted to start a booktube channel. I was trying to get away from rereads and I was trying to reinvigorate my love of reading and the sort of variety of books that I was picking up. But one of the ways that I decided to try and do that was to take part in a reading challenge. And what Victoria read, Victoria over on that channel had announced her winter reading challenge, and I thought that working through some of those prompts, I don't think I'll complete it in the time frame that she set for. She was going to do a giveaway or something, but she did sort of acknowledge that the time frame on that didn't involve the whole of the winter, so I think I'll be one of the participants that takes it across the whole of the season rather than the entry period for the competition side of it. But one of the prompts was a reread, and so I listened to the audiobook version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It was read by Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry's a great narrator. He's got one of those voices that is incredibly easy to listen to and incredibly soothing. And he does a good selection of voices and characters, and it's really easy to distinguish who's speaking and follow what's happening. Sometimes with a narrator, if they are not able to distinguish between characters very much, it can get a little confusing when lots of characters are talking over each other or talking between themselves in a conversation. But yeah, like I said, I've read Hitchhiker's Guide many times, and I kind of chose the audiobook kind of for ease, really. It meant that it could fit in while I was doing other things, and I could kind of have it on in the background whilst I was busy. So yeah, I always enjoy it. I will blatantly reread it again in the future. It's one of those books that's always going to feature intermittently in my reading just because I do enjoy it so much. So moving on to the new reads, we have So Late in the Day by Claire Keegan. This one's really short, it's about 50 pages. Again, another one of the ways that I'm trying to get through my reading slump is to pick short reads that don't feel too intimidating to start. I'm not really, at the moment, I'm not really feeling as though I want to be picking up any massive tomes that's going to take weeks and weeks and weeks to plod through. Any sort of epic tales that are going to take over my time, I just don't have it. So short stories, short novels, novellas, those sorts of things are probably going to feature quite heavily, and they've worked quite well for me this month while I've been doing this. So Late in the Day, a lot of Claire Keegan stuff is short. This one is, like I say, particularly short. It follows a man who is going about his day-to-day life on the day that should have been his wedding day. It is not his wedding day, quite frankly, through his own fault. But it follows what happened in the run-up to today, why it hasn't worked out as he perhaps had hoped, and what, if anything, he has learnt from that. But you do get to the end sort of thinking that there wasn't a huge learning curve for this character. You get the idea that he's perhaps noticing errors he may have made, but you also get the impression that if everything happened again, he would do exactly the same thing again. He would just perhaps maybe emotionally prepare himself for the fact that it would not work out. I don't think I'm spoiling anything. It's so short, there isn't time to spoiler anything. You know within the first couple of pages that it should have been his wedding day. It is not. And then you take a step back and learn about the woman that he was going to marry and how he behaved in that relationship, and how the attitude of other people around him changed or didn't change or played into his and her responses to that. I loved this. It was frustrating in terms of you want to reach in and shake the character and sort of just get him by the elbows and tell him to stop it. But it's beautifully written. It's beautifully observed. The pacing on it is lovely. Claire Keegan's writing's always very poetic, and she writes about a certain kind of Irish. I have an Irish family, and I recognise some of these And I thoroughly, it's a good time. It'll take you less than an hour. It's not a big commitment, but yeah, I enjoyed that one. Next up we have Eating for, I don't know if you can see that, Eating for Victory. It's non-fiction. It's a collection of information leaflets that were put out by the Ministry for Food, I want to say, during World War II, and they help, I was going to say households, but let's be honest, it's primarily housewives, make the most of their food ration. It gives nutritional information about why certain foods are good for you and how they help you maintain your health, and then it gives recipes that help you if you were looking into your larder or pantry and you were coming to the end of your ration and you still had a few days before you were able to go and get anything new. These leaflets, I imagine, would have been really helpful for sort of going, okay, what do I do with 3 potatoes, an onion and a bit of powdered egg? Really interesting historically, also really interesting in terms of like thinking about what you eat and your food. I'm not a cook by any, even the most generous of measures. I'm not a cook, but I do like to eat fairly simply. It's something that tends to go with my cooking because I have health issues and disabilities that impact my ability to be in the kitchen for any length of time. I buy an awful lot of pre-packaged, pre-prepared food, but I do try and avoid ultra-processed stuff. So there's obviously a cost premium to that. If you're buying your fruit and veg pre-cut and pre-peeled and what have you, it's more expensive. So it can be tempting to just, it seems like it's just a small step to go from pre-cut and pre-prepared to processed to pre-made meals. And reading stuff like this kind of always reminds me that, yes, I might be paying for somebody else to peel carrots, but it's still going to be a healthier option to kind of construct meals in that way than it is to eat things that are too overly processed or too additive and ingredient complex, and that actually keeping things simple is the easiest option and best option for you health-wise. So I heard about this from, I have to remember because she's recently rebranded her channel. She was Ration Book Rebecca. She's now Rebecca at the Railway Cottage, and I absolutely adore her channel. Her videos are so wholesome and so full of joy, and she's such just a really positive person, and even when she's faced with challenges or problems, she always has the most upbeat approach to it. And she's very into her 1940s and her World War II and her retro and vintage kind of vibes, which I absolutely share and totally love and appreciate. And a couple of times on her channel, for both health and financial reasons, she has followed and documented following a ration book diet, and this is one of the books that she refers to and she mentions in a couple of her videos. So I'd seen it already and I thought it looks like it was quite a comprehensive one. The fact that it's the collected things from the period just sort of meant that it was very authentic, and I wanted to see what they said. So I enjoyed that. It was a good reference. It's one of those things that I know I'm going to keep on the shelf and I'll refer back to from time to time. Next up, in a complete, I mean just the most massive change of pace, we have Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees by Patrick Horvath. Horvath? Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Patrick. This is a graphic novel. This was originally released as a series of shorter comic books, but this is the full collected edition. This on the front here, you can see the top of her head. This is Samantha. Samantha is a bear and she is cute as a button, and she lives in a small American town where the community is made up of animals and woodland creatures, and they are all adorable. And Samantha is a popular and well-loved part of this community. She runs the local hardware store, and she is known and liked and respected in town. Samantha is also a serial killer, but she has the good grace to regularly travel to the city to abduct and murder anonymous strangers and hide their bodies. She does this very carefully. She is a kind and considerate serial killer who makes great pains to make sure that her crimes don't impact on her nice, peaceful, small town community. So imagine her disappointment when an incredibly graphic murder is committed publicly in the middle of her town, in full view of everybody. This sparks a series of killings in the town that brings in press and police attention, which puts Samantha's very carefully constructed life of crime at risk, because it's very difficult to provide your alibi for a murder if your alibi is that you were somewhere else committing a different murder. So Samantha does what all right-thinking serial killers do, which is that she turns detective to find the new killer, to stop them from ruining everything. I loved this. It is so twisted because it's so adorable. The animals are so cute and it's so wholesome right up until the point when it turns into an episode of Dexter. The violence is graphic and gratuitous, but also it's like if Quentin Tarantino adapted Beatrix Potter, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's niche. You're either going to get this or you're not. It's not going to be to everybody's taste, but this is the kind of weird that is absolutely up my street, and I loved this. 10 out of 10, no notes. Finally, we have The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes. This is the story of a man who is, I think he's retirement age. He is divorced and he receives information that he has been left a diary in the will of somebody he knew when he was younger. The first part of the book is following his younger years, when he's at university and when he's at private school and then at university, and he meets the players in the rest of the story. And the second half of the book is him being contacted by a solicitor's firm who are dealing with the estate of somebody who's died, and he's been left a diary. And what unfolds from there is him revisiting memories of those years when he was growing up and having to reassess some of the conclusions that he'd reached or some of the assumptions that he'd made throughout his life about who he was, about who these people were that he was interacting with, and about how events played out. It's, again, a short one. I think it's less than 200 pages. Certainly less than 250. Yeah, I think it's about 170 pages. So again, a quick read. I read this in one sitting. It's beautifully written. I'm going to have to seek out something else. I haven't read anything else by Julian Barnes before. I've heard the name, but I haven't read anything else of his. I'm going to have to seek out some more and explore his work a little more, because I really loved the prose style in this. I was also really intrigued by the premise. One of the themes that I really love reading about is the passage of time, roads not travelled, how the same event can look different to different people who experience it. And this is exactly what this kind of digs into, albeit swiftly and briefly. It was difficult to warm to the character in this. The main character in this is thoroughly difficult, and it's written from a very male perspective. So all of the women in this there's a certain kind of misogyny that dismisses women by supposedly elevating them, by giving them power and influence and intent that they don't have, and using that as a reason to write them off or to ignore them or to blame them for male inadequacies or failings or unfulfilled potential. And that happens an awful lot through this. The main character in this, whether it's his mother, his ex-girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend's mother, his wife, his daughter, every woman he encounters, he credits them with being smarter than he is, or more aware than he is, or more experienced than he is, or more worldly than he is, and therefore it's their fault when his relationships don't work out the way he wanted them to, or when he doesn't succeed in his career, or when his marriage is stale and boring, or when his daughter doesn't come to see him or call him as often as he thinks she should. It's always because these women have the power and they are choosing to do these things to him, as opposed to his own behaviour leading to them responding to him in a certain way. And he always seems to think that it's inevitable that women will be like this because women are distant, manipulative, difficult, whatever his perception is. And it's, like I say, it's a strange kind of misogyny that gives women power and intent and, like I say, malevolence that they don't really have, and then uses that as a reason to hold them responsible for things that they were simply bystanders in and responding to. And the book's written in a really strange way because he's the narrator, because he's the main character. It's written in a way that kind of gives him that agency to talk about them in that way. And he never really explores that in any depth, but it's also written in a way that makes clear, subtly, but does make clear that the women around him are gradually, one by one, just going, for God's sake, you're an idiot. I can't work with this. I can't, you're not listening to me. And that's comes up a lot, is that the women in his life say to him, you're not listening, or you're not hearing, or you're not understanding. And he never takes that cue to sort of go, okay, well, tell me again. Hang on, I'll think about it. I'll go back and look again. And he goes back and looks again, but he goes back and looks again and sort of says, oh, maybe I'm remembering it wrong. But anyway, and there's never a moment where he sort of goes, oh, actually, that was on me. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I'll definitely read more by Julian Barnes, but it was one of those ones where you spend quite a lot of time infuriated, actually like the Claire Keegan, where you're infuriated by the character's attitude to the women around him and refusal to kind of engage with that in any meaningful sense, to grow, to kind of change his view of women over time. You sort of think, well, how does a man reach, and obviously it's perfectly possible because it happens all the time, hello patriarchy, but how does a man go through his entire life meeting woman after woman after woman and consistently being told, you're not listening, you don't understand, you've misunderstood, you're wrong, and continually failing in those relationships and wanting those relationships to work but failing, but also completely unable to accept any agency in that at all, to change behaviour so that the next relationship might function differently. But yeah, it's a really interesting character study, and like I say, beautifully written, really, really gorgeous prose. So there we go. So that's what I read in November. I am enjoying picking up new things and trying to try stuff that is not in my normal TBR habits. And it does seem to be working so far. Like I say, I've had some really good choices this month. I've really enjoyed what I've read. I've been reading things that have made me think and that have made me kind of reach for other books that I thought, okay, well, I'd like to explore that idea more. I'd like to explore that writer more. So yeah. Anyway, what have you guys been reading? Any any comments, anything below that you want to tell me about what I've read or what you thought if you read those things, or anything that you think I should try based on those things. I'm always really keen for recommendations. Anyway, I hope everybody's well. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye.